Hello, everyone. This is Inspire a PhD. It's a podcast that puts a name, face, and voice to the experiences of PhD graduates. And here we speak with graduates, PhD, who, in their own voice, are really going to describe their whole PhD journey. And we want to know what PhD is and what it is not in their own voice. Today, I have a great privilege of having somebody with me here. In my own journey as a PhD student, I want to say that he has also inspired me, even while he was a PhD student. And today I have Dr. Opeyemi Olokede here with me. He has a PhD in chemical engineering, my field too. And I'm just so excited that he's here with us today. I'm not going to, I just want him to tell us who he is, his academic background, and his journey up till now. So, Dr. Olokede, please, can you introduce yourself to us?
Hi everyone, my name is Opeyemi Olokede. I'll say my journey started in Alagbado, Lagos, and if you don't know where that is, that's perfectly fine. Kind of the outskirts of one of the most popular cities, or populous cities in Nigeria. I grew up there, did my elementary school there, secondary school, so that's a high school there, and I had the privilege of attending Covenant University. I think still one of the top private universities in Nigeria as at the time of this recording. So there, I studied chemical engineering, got my bachelor's. I would say there I also found my faith. I just got a lot of direction in life right there and then. It was definitely a pivotal moment for me, those 5 years. Then after Covenant University, I did my, what Nigerians would call NYSC, your National Youth Service Corps. So I worked for the government, did some civil service for about a year. And then during that period, I was applying to graduate programs in the United States. So shortly after that, I came to the US about August 2017 to start my PhD program, which I then completed August 2022. So it took about roughly 5 years. And I think that's where I'm going to stop. Well, my journey up until now, I will add, I didn't go into academia. I went into the industry. So I'm currently working for a firm that mixes chemical engineering with software engineering. So it's a very interesting field to step into. So that's what I currently do.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. Thank you so much for stressing the fact that you work in the industry, and we're still going to talk about that later on. So I want to ask, at what point did you know that you were going to do a PhD?
So I would say from early on, about my freshman year, I always wanted to get a master's degree.
Okay.
I don't know why. I think my father had a master's degree. He was very big on education. As a child, he never bought us novels. I think the first non-school related book I read was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And I read that at the age of 10. So, so that's to show you the kind of father I had. He just wanted you to read and read and read, get educated. So from my initial year in college, I definitely wanted to get some kind of advanced education. But the PhD idea did not come about until my fourth year. And it was quite interesting, to be honest. A professor walked into the class. He was teaching a course. And this was a course with just chemical engineering students. And all of a sudden, he just stops teaching and begins to talk about his personal life and how he wanted to go get a PhD, but he couldn't because of political issues going on in Nigeria when he was younger. And then he pointed straight at me and he said, "You have that opportunity now. Make sure you take advantage of it." And I didn't understand exactly what he meant. So going to his office afterwards, asking some more questions, getting some more clarity, he explained what it meant to me. He explained a lot of the opportunities that people have in the United States. He explained how many of his students are taking that path, But at this point, I was still very skeptical. But as God would have it, 2 weeks later, I'm standing at a bus stop and I run into someone who graduated from chemical engineering, Covenant University, about 2 years prior. For some reason, the person recognized me, and the person was saying, "Hi, Opey," and I'm like, "Who are you? Don't talk to me, Are you trying to rob me?" I got all defensive because it was a very public place with people moving all over. And he said, "Don't you remember me?" and all that. So we started talking, and that's when he said, "Oh, I'm enrolled in a PhD program in Florida." I said, "Like Florida in the US?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Whoa, who wrote your letter of recommendation?" He named that professor. And that's when it clicked, like, oh my goodness, this is legitimate, and that's when I decided, okay, this is definitely a path worth in investigating. So based on my background, the kind of family I grew up in, my upbringing, I've always loved studying. I've always loved reading. I've been more of an independent student. So the PhD path seemed very attractive to me for that reason, being able to investigate a particular research topic and just focus on it for a few years. I figured that I would definitely go down that way.
Wow. That's really interesting, to be picked by somebody and and to be identified. That's really great. So what happened? How many universities did you apply to? How did you arrive at the university where you did your PhD?
This is a little bit of a funny answer. I got my PhD at Texas A&M University, the same school that Ife is also enrolled at. I never Aggies, right?
Yeah.
How do we say Texas Fighting Aggies? Whoop, right? I don't know.
I don't know.
My wife always says that I went through A&M did not go through me,
I think that's gonna be my own case too if I don't do something about it. I just know about Gigem.
Thanks and Gigem. Okay, well, that's something. That's something. So I never planned on applying to Texas A&M. It wasn't even on my list of schools. So I was gonna apply to LSU. UT Austin, University of Colorado at Boulder, and then I think Case Western Reserve University. That was like my backup school. So I didn't have like 10 schools I was applying to. I had more like 4, maybe 5. Maybe I'm forgetting one of them. Yeah. So this same professor, right? I was reaching out to him for letters of recommendation. And then he called me on one particular day during the application process, and he says, "Apply to Texas A&M. If you don't apply to Texas A&M, I will not write a letter of recommendation for you to any of the schools you're applying to." And I was like, this is blackmail, right? But as those of us who grew up in Nigeria know, you do what you're told. So I stayed up all night, put in an application to Texas A&M. The following day, I called this professor to tell him, "Hey, I did what you said. I applied to Texas A&M." And then I had paid the application fees. I had just gone through with everything because the threat was so serious. Only for this man to say, "Oh, A&M? Oh, no. I meant UT Austin." Yep. He denied it outright. He said,
Wow.
I did not mention A&M. When did I mention A&M? You're putting words in my mouth. I was like, wow. All right, that's fine. So that's how I wound up applying to Texas A&M.
Wow.
It was all a big mistake.
All a big mistake.
Or you could say it was the hand of God.
So maybe it was even God speaking to your ears.
Yes. And that's how I heard what I heard. That's very possible.
Wow. And then from there, you just got your admission?
Yeah, so from there, the schools I got into, I got so there was actually a 5th school. There was Ohio State University. So that was the first school I heard back from, got a positive reply from them. I even got a fellowship, like a diversity fellowship. But I prayed and prayed, and I just felt in my heart to wait. And then while waiting, UT Austin sent me a rejection letter, and I was like, God, this is what I'm supposed to be waiting for, Then UC Boulder put me on their wait list. I said, wow, okay, this is weird. Then A&M reached out to me, but all they said was, oh, we want to have a Skype interview with you. So in my mind, I felt, okay, maybe I made it to the final stage, or maybe there's still like 100 people. I didn't realize that they had given me admission already. They just wanted to validate that I was who I said I was. And Texas A&M, the chemical engineering department, had never admitted someone from Covenant University before.
Oh.
Yes. In all of their history, I was the very first to that department. And I think I was one of the first Nigerians that they took directly into their PhD program without a master's degree.
Wow.
So it was a lot of first for them. And for that reason, they, were very careful with me. But they didn't explain any of this to me until I'd been there for about a year or 2 years. And that's when they finally opened up, and said, oh, well, this is why we did what we did. But in hindsight, it was definitely the hand of God just telling me to wait. And I think Texas was exactly where God wanted me to be. And not in Austin.
Yeah.
So it all worked out.
That's great. Wow, that's really great. Like, as you were giving the step by step, I see that it was not like a decision that you rushed into. It was, carefully thought and prayed about. That's awesome. So what about your research? How was that for you? How did you already know what you were going to do, or it was when you got to Texas A&M that you tell us what the process was?
So this part is a little tricky. So for people who have a chemical engineering background, you know that there are different fields of chemical engineering. You have reaction kinetics, you have thermodynamics, transport phenomena, So reaction kinetics was where I wanted to do some researching, because I would say that is my strongest point compared to the other fields. However, I was also interested in renewable energy and things like that. But you see, I didn't even have a specific type of renewable energy I wanted to work on. I just wanted to see what is all of this craze about, and this is me back in Nigeria applying to schools in 2016, not knowing anything about what was going on in different fields of research. So I figured to myself, okay, I want something either kinetics or something renewables related, and that was what guided my application process. So the professor and the research that I did, one of the reasons why I even chose to work under that professor was because he was the one who interviewed me on Skype for the university, right? And it was, I still remember this, sitting in my sister's room in Alagbado, with the generator turned on just for this interview, with as many like lamps turned on as possible, so that it's not dark. And I'm wearing a 3-piece suit, talking to this man, and he looks at me and he says, "Oh, you're dressed really sharp," And then shortly after he says, "Oh, you can turn off the video. Now that I've seen your face, it doesn't matter to save your bandwidth." And I said, "Wow, that is so kind." That immediately stood out to me. So from the very beginning of the conversation, I realized that I was talking to someone who was very conscientious and who cared about other people. Because I wasn't a student. He didn't even know if he was going to take a student at that point.
Oh.
Yeah, so he had some financial funding issues and other elements of things going on. But as we talked and we talked, and he asked me a lot of questions, I would answer. I would ask him questions as well. Eventually, he said, hey, he started saying things like, College Station, which is where the school is. College Station is a really nice town. It's a great place. It's very quiet, you know. And that's when I realized that, oh, it's trying to sell the location. That means I'm in, you know. So that's what clicked in my head. And just based on that conversation, I just spoke with him and I said, look, if I come to A&M in the fall, can you take me into your lab?
Yeah.
In that moment, he knew he had to commit, right? And he said, okay, if you come, I'll take you. And that was how I wound up in his research lab. So the kind of stuff that he works on is he takes waste and he turns it into fuel. Now there are so many different ways you can go about doing that. But the kind of research I did, we would take a mixed culture of microorganisms. I'm pretty sure your mind is already thinking, what organisms? Well, my answer to you is that there's a lot of organisms, you know?
Yeah.
So the point of the study was not to choose specific organisms, but to use whatever you could find in nature. So we would collect water from the beach at Galveston, Texas, and we would use that to inoculate our biodigesters, and those bugs from the beach would break down all of your biodegradable waste and convert it into a special kind of acid. Then that acid can then be hydrogenated and ketonized to gasoline. So that was what we were doing, and it was a very funny research lab because the equipment wasn't fancy. You know, when people think bioreactors, they're thinking stainless steel. We use plastic. Because once you have a mixture of microorganisms, you don't care what's in there, they're going to survive, you know. So even when if the power goes out or whatever, like the culture might shift, but once you restore them back to their original condition, the culture will eventually shift back. So it was a very robust kind of process, you know. And in terms of commercialization, there are actually at least 2 companies now working on that. I think one of them is worth close to $100 million. They're building a chemical plant, so there's a lot of work going on there. But I have stepped back from all of that. I'm just focusing on my career, and I think eventually maybe I will go back into that space.
That's great. I mean, creating alternative energy and going away from the traditional gasoline and crude oil. That's really great. Yeah. That's great. You were changing the world.
Well, it's the challenge with renewables is a lot of people think there is a silver bullet, right? There's a straightforward answer. But the thing is, we need to combine so many different things. Like the kind of research that I did was trying to answer 2 problems. The problem of waste. Like people make a lot of waste, and sewage treatment plants do not know what to do with all the stuff that they have. Like if they could actually just break all of that down into specialty chemicals that don't go into food or go into fuels, then you don't need 99.9% purity that you need for food, right? Because for fuels, you're just going to burn it. And then the other aspect of sourcing your biomass from like plants and things like that is you're still working within the carbon cycle, right? You're working within the carbon cycle compared to just fossil fuels, where it's like you're just pumping out all that CO2. So it's different. Everyone's trying to solve the problem in their own way, and I think eventually you're going to need a mixture of solutions to get anything to work.
Wow, that's really great. Thank you for answering that question. And I just want to ask, I'm curious, can you remember like the most rewarding aspect of your research, like your journey? What point will you define as the point where you felt most rewarded, like this is it?
Oof. I would say the end. I would say collecting what's what I'm looking for? Collecting that diploma. that felt like the most rewarding moment, because there's just something about it. You're wearing this really goofy gown, and then someone calls your name, and because they're not Nigerian, they don't say it properly,
Yeah,
and you walk up
yeah.
on stage, and then they're like putting a hood on you, flipping it over, all that stuff, So I would say like that moment felt magical for me, because it was the end of a very long journey. Now I know for some people it might be different, but for me it was just like that moment, like giving my professor a big hug, and he telling me like, I'm so proud of you, well done. Like it was it was something else. But yeah, that's it for me.
That's great. That's great. And I'm just gonna, go back a bit, and ask how different was the educational system, and how did you cope if it was different? I mean, coming from Nigeria and then here in the US, how would you compare that, and what were the things that you needed to do to, adapt into the system?
I think the first difference I noticed was the weighting, the weighting of different aspects of your continuous assessment. So, for example, in Nigeria, the exam was worth 70% of your grade.
Yes.
While over here, the exam could be worth only 40, maybe even 30%. Like it's severe. Then in Nigeria, depending on the school, to get an A, you have to get maybe 80 and above, 75 and above. Like it kind of varies. Over here, to get an A, you have to get 90 and above. So I was like, whoa, this is different, and it kind of made me realize fairly quickly that you had to get your act together from the very beginning of the semester. I felt like in Nigeria, the first few weeks you kind of joke around, knowing that you'll catch up on the second test and then on the final exam.
Yeah.
In the US, like if you mess up the very first mid-semester exam, like you could be done. It means the highest you could get is a B. Like that's actually quite possible. So that was jarring for me, especially for like grad level thermodynamics. I worked really hard to pull up that A. I think I got an A by like 0.2 or something like that. It was something else. So yeah. Then I'll say another big difference would be something called office hours. In Nigeria, I don't remember any of my professors having office hours.
No.
It's all dependent on their mood.
Yeah.
Chances are they didn't want you in their office. But over here, seeing professors say, hey, I'm going to be in my office from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Come talk to me, come ask me questions. I was very skeptical initially. I was like, is this real?
Is this for real? Like, is this a trick?
Yeah, you walk in and you ask questions and they answer your questions. Like, wow, that's amazing. I can't believe people fail here. And then the third big difference is teaching assistants. Teaching assistants. I didn't really have that in Covenant University. I don't know if that has changed, but that was a huge difference. There being someone who was like grading all the mundane homeworks, and who you could go to, and the person could actually walk you through a problem, multiple times and things like that. That was really good. So having both the professor for the expertise, but having the TA for just basic answers. I think all of that combined, it really creates a system in which if you're hardworking, you will flourish. So it was.
So if you would make some changes in the Nigerian education system, you want those three, right?
I don't think it's my place to speak about changes in the Nigerian educational system.
Okay.
But I do think that the Nigerian educational system does stem from the British system, and the British system is more difficult than the American system. Even in Britain today, that is still the case. So I wouldn't even go as far as saying that there's something wrong with the Nigerian educational system. I would say Nigeria inherited what the British taught us, and that's what they do. So I would say that we need to get the powers that be on the American side and the British side, the European side, and have them have a conversation about higher education. And maybe things can then be done in other parts of the world. But no, this has to go from top down. That's how it needs to happen.
Wow, that's really interesting. I like your this perspective that I just shared. Like, it's a different system altogether. Thank you so much. So now, we spoke about the rewarding part of your research. So what was the most challenging part of your research?
The most challenging part of my research. There was this stretch. This is going to be a little hard to explain. So let me kind of give a summary. When I joined the research group, there was another PhD student and a few master students. But after a few years, all of them graduated, and my professor was essentially broke and couldn't take on any students. Like, I was the only student he had. But then just when the last master students were graduating, COVID happened. COVID-19 struck. And because of that, I couldn't run any experiments, couldn't do anything in the lab. Some of our equipment was, faulty, but it was too expensive for us to repair. We couldn't afford to repair it because the lab was broke. So that was going on. But you see, during that period, that's when I had to start writing and publishing papers. So I would say that became quite difficult for me because it was like write an entire research paper from scratch. And my professor is very hands off. So I actually had to buy books on how to write research papers and read about how to write. I had to take a writing class. There's a fantastic one at A&M. Dr. Patricia Dobson.
Goodson.
Oh, yes. There you go. Yeah. So did you take a class?
I didn't have a class, but I was also reading on books about writing myself. and I came across her name was her books were recommended by somebody, and I was going through the preface just before I ordered it, and I saw that she's also at A&M, and I was like, what are the odds? And I got the book, and then I got into one of her power writing classes. I was so excited. Yeah.
So she is phenomenal. I going to her class changed my life forever. Because when you go through that experience, you realize that you can always write. You can write on any topic. You just have to start somewhere. But I would say that period was very difficult for me because number one, it was lonely. There were no other researchers. All had left. It was just me. No postdoc, nothing. Then COVID happened, so everybody was stuck at home. So, and then we had run out of funding as well. So I had to go on a weird internship, which I won't really go into the details of, with a company that went bankrupt like 6 months afterwards. But there were just so many different things going on. It was all just crazy. So that was a very difficult time. The huge positive during that time was that I got married. So it's like while my research was burning, my relationship and marriage was flourishing.
Awesome.
So that was great. and then here's the crazy part. And this is why I said it's a little crazy. Like when I was finally, or COVID was, going out and people are like getting back on campus, and I was like, okay, let's start running experiments, let's do this, let's do that. What happens? We have the winter storm in Texas.
Oh,
so if you're
that's true.
If you're listening to this podcast and you were in Texas 2021 February, you would remember. It was horrible. And my lab is on the 6th floor on campus. And unfortunately, the chemical engineering building uses water as a cooling system. So what do you think happens, right? All of that water would freeze. When water freezes, it expands. All the chemical engineers listening are like, of course, it expands. And when it breaks through the pipes, then it begins to melt, and now you have water everywhere. So we lost hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment. So that was another huge setback during that time. Yeah. And also, since my professor had run out of funds, he couldn't pay my tuition any longer. Yeah. So the university, well, somebody on payroll terminated my contract without telling me or anybody. So I just woke up one day. I had lost my insurance. I had lost my position in the university, because my professor couldn't pay my tuition. So eventually, he actually wrote a check to pay my tuition from his own pockets. And then for my monthly stipend, he had the university pull out from his salary to pay me. And that went on for a while until the head of the department found out what was going on. And then he was very upset. He said, why? Like, what is all this? So then they made me a teaching assistant, and I was a teaching assistant for like the last year at Texas A&M. But my professor never wanted me to be a teaching assistant because he wanted all of my focus to be on the research, and he was willing to pay from his own pocket.
I can imagine.
So it was, to be honest, things were very, very difficult, a lot of ups and downs during that period. So that's why I can't really say, what was the most difficult thing, because it was like there's no money. The lab
so many
exploded,
things happening all at the same time.
It was a mess.
Wow. So while you were having these challenging moments, right? What would you say really helped you? Because some of our listeners and our viewers some of them may be going through difficult times in their work, and it seems as if there is no end, right, to it. What would you say helped you come out of those moments?
I would say the biggest thing for me was my faith. My faith in God, being surrounded by other believers of like mind who I could talk to about my frustrations. That really, really, really helped. I don't think that can be overemphasized. I think another thing that helped, and this might be ironic for some people, but another thing that helped was getting married. Because
we're going to talk about that, okay?
Because it gave me, it helped me to reassess my priorities. My wife talks about this all the time. She says that when we first met, I was all about chemical engineering. I was an engineer through and through, fugacity.
That was your identity.
Yeah, that was my identity. But fast forward to now I'm a resident pastor at a church in Dallas. Like my life has changed so much, and I would say getting married really helped me to realize that there are more important things than getting a PhD or being this amazing researcher and all. Because coming to Texas A&M, I felt like I had a point to prove. I'm going to publish all these papers. I'm going to make my name great and all that. But realizing that, God has a plan for my life, and I don't need to make something out of my life. I should let God make something out of my life. That brings a lot of peace to realize that you are not God. There is a God, and He has a plan, and His plan for you is way better than anything you could have ever come up with. So my marriage, for example, showed me that. It was humbling that I got to marry such a spectacular woman during a PhD
Wow.
When a time when people are losing their marriages, right? That's when
Yeah. Yeah.
I was gaining
Mm-hmm.
mine,
Mm.
I mean, we've been amazing ever since. So that's how I got through those moments.
That's beautiful, and you know, it's like you said, it's ironic, because you know some people would think that having been married during a PhD is like, you know, not being focused because it could be distracting,
Mm.
and you are saying it wasn't, like it even helped you to you know, be more to identify or prioritize your what's that English?
To reprioritize.
Yes, to reprioritize, and so me now I just want to tell us now, like, no more secrets. How did getting married help you in your PhD? What areas? Can you give us scenarios,
So
examples?
I'll give practical examples.
Okay.
Now, if you're a PhD student, I'm sure you've experienced this. You don't really have a schedule. You don't really have a schedule. You wake up, you go to work as early as you can, and you work till as late as you can,
Yes.
and then you come back home. That is your life.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
Yes. Yes.
sometimes, if you run experiments, you might be in the lab by 4 a.m., 2 a.m.,
Yes. Mhm.
5 a.m. That was my
Yes.
life also.
Mm.
Getting married and having someone who, first of all, would be at home whenever you
Mm.
come home, and then that person is there to love you, to care for you, to take care of you, and to say, hey, leave all of that PhD stuff at school and let's come
Yeah.
home and let's come have some fun. You know,
Yeah.
it was amazing because it's like, hey, like you can come home and then she says, you know what, let's go check out this restaurant, or let's go see
Mhm.
this movie, or let's
Oh
go do this
wow.
fun activity.
Mhm.
Because here's the thing, like most people who get PhDs, you can kind of be loners. You come home and you're just like,
Mm.
let no man trouble me, for I
Yeah.
bear the marks of a PhD, right?
I'm a
So
PhD.
let me
Oh,
just
that's
rest, let
nice.
me lay on this couch. But having Natalie in my life, it was just an epiphany that no, that you can go do fun activities, you can
Mm.
actually talk with people, you can relax.
Yeah.
And I think uh, the emotional protection that a marriage offers,
Mm.
having someone who you can completely just open yourself to and be honest with about everything, with your
Yeah.
fears,
Mm.
your ambitions,
Mhm.
your thoughts. Like it does something to you. It
Mm.
does something to you. It builds your self-esteem. It builds your self-confidence. um, you know and I'm being very open here because Ika wants
Yes.
me to be open. So I
Please be.
personally, I've never, well, let me put it this way. Prior to dating my wife and getting married, I never
Mhm.
thought of myself as a good looking guy.
Oh.
Yeah, I actually never thought about myself that way, and that was
Mhm.
because of like previous relationship baggage and all that
Mhm.
stuff.
Mhm.
Everybody
Mhm.
has something they've been through.
Yeah.
But like dating my wife, getting married to her, having someone who is beautiful, tell you that you look
Uh-huh.
good,
Oh
you are
dear.
smart,
Uh-huh.
you are
Uh-huh.
capable, you can
Yeah.
get through this challenge.
Oh.
Y'all don't know how powerful that is. It's very,
Oh.
very powerful. So
Wow.
knowing that this person loves you, cares for you, and supports you,
Mm.
it was like a supercharge for me
Wow.
to really push through a lot of those hurdles. And
Mm.
even during the PhD program, I went ahead and also studied for the fundamentals of engineering exam. And
Wow.
like all during all of that chaos, I did
Mhm.
that. Why did I do that? I did that because of my wife.
Mm.
Because I thought to myself, yeah, the PhD is great, but I also want to have this addendum, so that I can always provide for her. So that push
Mm.
was, it was needed. It was needed. And I think it also brings this extra element of, as long as she's happy, I'm not doing anything wrong. So
Yes.
coming home and serving her and helping her to feel like, hey, this man cares for me, this man loves me. Like
Yeah.
if my wife is happy and my wife is excited, I don't even care. I don't care if the lab is burning down.
The whole is
That's what that did for me. And here's the thing, if you're in a PhD right now and maybe you're not in a relationship, you're single, I'm not even saying get in a relationship and get married. What I'm trying to say is this: community is a powerful thing. Having people in your life that legitimately care about you, want you to succeed, are looking out for you, help you distress, that is incredibly important. That's why I tell people, don't go get a PhD in North Dakota, where there is no one that you know or no one of your culture, anything right? Like, look for a place where you can find other individuals similar to you. Don't just go to the middle of nowhere because you want to get a degree. You need that support. We all do.
Thank you so much, Ope. This is really great. This is really great because one of the challenges with PhD is the mental, the mental challenges that PhD bring. I mean, that comes with PhD, and very few people, especially international students, they struggle more with this because here they just have to build that community. Maybe where they're coming from, they had that community of support, but coming to a new country, a foreign country, you just have to find that and build that community. Thank you very much, Ope, for talking about that. It is important. Community is important, and you have it even right there in your house. Okay, you had one living in your own house. Exactly. That's awesome. That is awesome. And before we wrap up with this podcast, I have one question that I often ask everybody, and that is that for somebody that is new, considering doing a PhD or has already started, what advice would you give such people? What very important advice would you like to give them?
I will start with the person who is considering getting a PhD. I think, if I were to talk to myself in the past, or a version of myself who is like, I want to apply to schools and all that, one of the first things I would tell them is a PhD program is a marathon. You have to just run your own race and not compare yourself to other people. Classic example, I published, I don't know, 4 or 5, I think about six research papers during my studies. I have friends who published close to 20.
Wow.
Yeah, but here's the big difference. I was running biological experiments where it took me 3 months at least to get decent data. They were doing computational work where once the code clicks, you can get so much out of it. But if I had been comparing myself to them and not considering the nuances, I would have just been thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not doing enough. Maybe I can do more, maybe I can do more, and then you beat yourself down and you lose your confidence. So I would say, don't compare yourself to anyone, run your own race. I would also say that your choice of PhD advisor is one of the most important choices you will ever make in your life. It's one of the most important choices you will ever make in your life. A PhD student is in a vulnerable position, especially in the United States, because chances are your tuition is being paid by your advisor, your stipends are being paid by your advisor. So you have to do what your advisor tells you to do, right? You want to make your advisor happy so that they keep on paying you so that you can stay in the program. What that essentially does is it puts you at the beck and call of this individual. You might have never thought about it that way, but a subconscious part of you knows that you must do that person's bidding. So this implies that you want to serve under someone who is kind, who is faithful, who cares about you, who actually wants to see you succeed. And those are not easy to find. Most advisors selfish individuals who only care about their own ambitions. And you have to look out for someone who would look out for you. So even as you're applying, to PhD programs, don't just look at the person's citation score. Try to see if you can judge their character. And sometimes you won't be able to judge that from your interaction with them. Sometimes you have to talk to their students. Yeah, and you have to isolate one student. If you talk to all of them, they will all say, "Oh yeah, we're happy here, we're happy here."
Yeah.
But if you can isolate one person, that person will say, "No, this guy is crazy. Oh my God." So you really want to investigate and just make sure you understand what you are stepping into. And now, if you're already in the PhD program, my biggest advice to you is, and this might sound kind of weird, exercise.
Ooh.
Yeah. If you're already in the PhD program, chances are you already know that there's suffering in your future. Maybe you've already been through some suffering already. So I've already spoken about the importance of community. So now I'm going to say you need to exercise. Wow. PhD students are incredibly unhealthy people. So enroll in a gym. Find a cheap one. Planet Fitness is actually super cheap, for example. Okay. Or if your university has a gym, enroll in that. But get up early, go run around, do something. Exercise actually does things not just to your physical health, but to your mental health also. You'll be surprised that maybe that research project you've been struggling with, it might open up when you finally step up and go for a run. And you just go outside. I remember one particular time during my PhD, I think this was close to the end, so the beginning of my 5th year. I had been indoors for about 2 to 3 months straight.
Wow.
I had not seen the sun. I know that sounds strange, but for those of you who work in a lab, you can probably relate to this. I would go into the lab very early, work, and then I would come out late at night. Wow. I was just cooped up doing my experiments, and I was doing a lot of pipetting. So that messed up my right shoulder and my upper back. So one day I woke up, I couldn't move my neck, my upper back was hurting, and I was running a fever.
Oh dear.
And immediately I realized I had made a big mistake. I knew it wasn't my enemies, no one poisoned me. I knew that I had just made poor choices. So what did I do? I took 2 days off from all forms of lab work.
Okay.
I got up each of those 2 days and I went outside and I walked around for close to 3 hours. That sounds insane, I know, but that fixed me right up. No medicine, nothing. I just walked outside. I remember the first day after the really long walk, I came back and the fever had left. Yeah, and I thought, because I hadn't exercised in only God knows how long. Only God knows how long. The human body was not designed to sit down in the lab and do this. Just move your hand back and forth. That's not what we're designed to do. Our body needs exercise. So please, maybe your PhD is going well, exercise. Maybe your PhD is going poorly, exercise. It will save you and your life, your health. You don't have to sacrifice your health on the altar of research. You don't have to.
Wow. This has been a great session with you. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. I'm sure this, even for me, it's very inspiring, with all the tips, the advice, and your journey and the challenges that you went through and, coming out, now a doctor working in the industry. And just before I finish, I want to ask, is there going to be work in academia sometime in your future?
Let's say academia is my retirement plan.
Oh, okay.
So in all honesty, I actually really like to teach. Like I mentioned earlier,
I know.
I'm a
You
teaching
taught
pastor
me. You
right now.
taught me.
Oh, that's true. I enjoyed being a teaching assistant.
Okay.
However, one of the reasons why I chose to do go for what's what I'm looking for industry, yeah, over academia, is because I let's just say the young professors I was seeing around me, they looked like they were having a really, really, really rough time. Because the path of academia is you go do a postdoc, and then after that, you get hired by a university, then you have to get tenure, right?
Yes.
To get tenure, you have to write and receive several grants, publish, I don't know how many papers, do all this research to prove that you are worthy of being tenured. And just seeing what this was doing to some of these professors, how they were transferring the aggression onto their own students. I saw all of that and I thought to myself, this is not my future. This is just not my future. And then I saw some other professors who were called professors of practice.
Yes.
Right. So they were in the industry for 30 years. And then they said, oh, I want to retire. Let me go teach. And then the university is like, yeah, we're going to make you a professor for free. So I look at that and I say, oh, that's my future right there. That makes a lot more sense to me. So in as much as I do like teaching, I decided to go the industry route. And here's the interesting part. My current role at my workplace involves actually training clients on different aspects of process engineering, natural gas pipeline networks, and we actually I get to teach a lot of our clients. It's part of my job description and the group that I work under. So we have trainings for clients on a weekly basis. This year, I've already been to Denver, Colorado to talk about some basic chemical engineering processes. I was in, I think I was in Fort Worth, Texas to talk about carbon capture technologies. I was in Houston just a few weeks ago to talk about carbon capture as well. And then I was in Austin earlier this year to talk about air emissions, because emissions is such a big thing right now, especially in the oil and gas industry. So what's interesting is even in the industry, if you search well enough, you can still find what you want. If you say what you want to do is teach, there are jobs that involve that in the industry.
Even in the industry.
Yeah. So I think I'm living a dream as far as I'm concerned.
and by the time you're out of the industry, you're still hot cake. So you're indeed living the dream. On this note, we're gonna wrap up, and I just want to say thank you so much. This has been a very great session with you, and I'm sure our listeners and our viewers are. I picked one. I'm sure more than one thing, even from this talk with you. Thank you so much, Dr. Olokede.
Hey, thanks, Ife.